Barry Bostwick, welcome to New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My first question to everybody here is, where's Old Zealand?
It's we sort of cast off. It's called Australia now.
Yes. And then somebody said Zealand was Dutch, so therefore this is the new Dutch city.
But you were all very our English roots and everything. We're far from the Dutch, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yes, we are. Very far from the Dutch, but we love the Dutch. I'm Dutch. My mother is called Deffendorf. That was her name, Deffendorf. So she was Dutch. So I like the Dutch. So don't say anything bad about the Dutch.
Oh, I'll make note of that. No more bad things about the Dutch. So welcome home then. Welcome to your new home.
Thank you very much. Yeah. My mother's looking down and quite pleased.
You've had a variety of roles, probably the most notable being a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel to be sort of immortalised in such a show that still gets shown around the world and still has that cult following and still gets performed in theatres around the world?
Humbled, honoured, and it's one of those it's such a one-off, that show, that it's whole books have been written about it, about its effect on film history and audience spectatorship and this and that. And I'm reading one now, and it fascinates me how I think when the show was conceived, obviously nobody knew what it was going to become, that it was going to have this whole other life with an audience participatory element to it. We were just making a fun movie, we thought. We were just having a good time, singing some rock and roll, adding a little sex and being a real reflection, we thought, of that sort of glitter rock mid-'70s scene, and playing these very sort of generic archetypal characters. And I think that's what its appeal is that there's probably some character in it that everybody can relate to, like you obviously are Brad. And I mean, you could have been Frankenfurter, but that maybe not quite yet. I look at you and I say Brad.
Of course, Rocky Horror, it has a big part of New Zealand culture, with Richard O'Brien being a New Zealander. Do you feel sort of does this feel like a privilege to be able to be here in New Zealand doing Armageddon and with your role in Rocky Horror?
Yeah, because I haven't seen Richard in 18 years or something. There was a 20th anniversary screening and sort of celebration at 20th Century Fox, a big thing. Probably was the last time most of the cast was together. I do a cartoon called Phineas and Ferb for kids, and my connection with Richard has always been, in the last few years, I play a grandfather in it, and he plays another grandfather of the two lead characters. So I hear his voice occasionally, and Swampy, the guy who was the producer of it, is always telling me stories about Richard O'Brien. But I think he's, recording it from his ranch somewhere in New Zealand. So I'm going to see him Saturday night for a Amnesty International charity event, and it'll be wonderful to see him. And I hope he's wearing a dress.
That's all right. Hopefully he'll be watching this, and he'll take on board your feedback.
I want something black with pearls. Okay, please.
Another role that you would be well known for in New Zealand, that's a more recent role, your role as Mayor in Spin City.
Yeah.
They're two very contrasting roles, I guess.
Yeah, well, Brad Majors probably became the mayor of New York, and then was shamed out of office by having trysts in Grand Central Station's bathrooms with young men, underneath the stalls. I think he probably hid this whole part of his life until he got into a position of power, and then abused it, and eventually was shamed, back to Connecticut. That's my take on it.
And then even more recently, a younger generation who may not have grown up with Rocky Horror or Spin City would have seen you sort of guest appear in other shows like Glee, for example.
Yeah, Glee. Well, Meatloaf and I did an episode of Glee, and we didn't play obviously our characters from Rocky Horror, and we were just sort of these sort of jerky television studio executives, and but it was wonderful to see the enthusiasm in the cast, the Glee cast, to do this show, to do the songs from the show, which, you know, after almost 40 years, to still have that kind of energy and that kind of appeal. We did an event last week in Melbourne at a theater, and Little Nell and I were there, and I swear to God, 90% of the people in this 1,000-person audience was under the age of 20, 22, you know, and I'm going, wow, everything old is new again. You know, these people, there is something that is so appealing about this movie. It is the coming-of-age film. You know, you see this movie and you sort of like come into your teenagehood and you question everything in your life, and that's basically what the movie is saying. You know, question it. You know, don't dream it, be it.
Are you going to get a bit of chance to see New Zealand and travel the country and while you're here?
We're going to go see something Hobbity today, I think. Some Hobbit places.
Oh, yeah, Hobbiton and Matamata?
Yeah. It's, yes, we'll get, Waiheke.
Oh, yeah, Waiheke.
Waiheke. I went to Waiheke yesterday and walked around and had a great time, you know. It's a beautiful country, and I can't wait to. Today we're going to drive out to Hobbiton. Yeah, and which will probably mean that I'll have to go see some Hobbit movies sometime to put it all together. And it's not my kind of movie. My movies have to have sex, drugs, or rock and roll in it, and those movies have neither.
I'm sure, you know, if we talk to Peter Jackson, we could probably get a sex, drugs, rock and roll version of Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah, sure. If anybody's willing to invest in it, I might be the only one seeing it. It'll be an audience of one, but please, Peter, do it, huh? Come on.
Barry Bostwick, thanks for joining us, and enjoy your time in New Zealand.
Thank you.